Whenever our chat loads or whenever we reload the page, we see within our messages area a blank area until our messages are loaded. So this isn't a very good user experience. We want to tell our user that our messages are in the process of being loaded, and we can do that with this messages loading property that we're setting in state in our messages component. So as our messages are being loaded, we'll show this skeleton component that we'll create, where within it this will be a stateless functional component, and it'll first contain a div with a class of skeleton. Within this div we'll have a number of divs with their own respective classes. First, a div with the class of skeleton avatar, next a div with the class of skeleton author, and then a div with the class of skeleton details. We'll export our skeleton component, and then we'll head to app.css and create the rules for each of these classes within a section that we'll call skeleton.js. So we'll begin with the skeleton class. So this main class will have a position of relative, overflow set to hidden. It'll have a height of 40 pixels, a margin bottom of 10 pixels, and we'll give it a pseudo element of after for additional styling. With the content set to an empty string, we'll set display to block. We'll give it a position of absolute. Top will be set to 0, left 0, a width of 50%, a height of 100%, and we'll animate it with this sweep animation, which will last 2 seconds and will be an infinite animation, and we'll include a background image which will be a linear gradient, the values to left, transparent, an RGBA of 255, 255, 255, an opacity of 0.4, and final value of transparent. And we'll set up a keyframes with the name of sweep. As the name of the animation suggests, we'll slowly sweep it across the skeleton div, first by putting the animation on the far left hand side of the div. So at 0%, we'll give it a translate x of a negative 100%. At 50% of the animation, when it's halfway through, we'll set translate x to 150%, sweep it over to the far right of the div, and then at 100%, we'll return translate x back to negative 100%. So this animation will take place over the course of 2 seconds, and within our skeleton div we'll have our skeleton avatar class with a height of 35 pixels, a width of 35 pixels, a border radius of 3 pixels, a background color of RGBA 50, 57, 57, and an opacity of 0.3. So this will be the outline of the avatar for a given message. For our skeleton author class, it'll have the same background color value, so we can copy that. It'll have a width of 120 pixels, a height of 10 pixels, a border radius of 3 pixels. Position will be set to absolute. We'll give it a bottom of 30 pixels, a left of 40 pixels, and a right of 0. Then for skeleton details, we'll give it a background color of the same value as skeleton author and skeleton avatar, a height of 20 pixels, border radius of 3 pixels, position absolute again, where bottom will be set to 5 pixels, left 40 pixels, right 20 pixels, and now we'll head back to messages and we'll make sure to import our skeleton component. So with the skeleton component, as the name suggests, it provides a kind of outline for each of our messages that are being loaded to describe to our user beforehand what they'll see in the UI. So now within render we can destructure messages loading from our state object, and within comment group or comment group component, we'll execute a new function called display messages skeleton, and we'll pass down messages loading to this function. So if messages loading is set to true, and we'll pass it to display messages skeleton as loading. If loading is true, we're going to display first a React fragment, and since the skeleton component represents one message being loaded, but we don't want to display just one skeleton but a number of them to fill up the messages section, we can use a trick where we use the array constructor, pass it a value of 10 to get 10 elements, spread that result into a new array, use the map method where we only use the index parameter. In the return, we return our skeleton. We're now iterating over our skeleton component 10 times. We'll give it a key prop set equal to I, which is why we're using it in the map function. And if loading is set to false, if we're not loading any messages, we're going to return null from display message skeleton. So now in our app, as our messages are being loaded, we'll display our skeleton component to show users the outline of each of the messages before they're actually displayed in the UI.